Today, Department of Transfusion Medicine will be sharing its experience, how we rendered our services during the last 5-6 months. As such, COVID is not spread by, not transmitted by blood transfusion, but our services, they were badly affected during last few months. One of the main issues was dwindling blood collection, as donors, they were unwilling to come to blood donation area because of various lockdowns. And despite some relaxation by government, still the movement was very much restricted, and it translated into dwindling supplies. And we managed, with our measures, new initiatives which were implemented and which will be discussed here by our speakers from our department. One of the other issue was that our blood center at ATC, that is at RCH, it was closed by the authorities, and thus we had to manage our activities from the main department. The QC lab of the main department was converted into dedicated COVID lab, and all the COVID positive samples, they were processed in that particular lab, and still that lab is functional. We are still doing all the testing, ABO and cross matching, so everything is being done in that lab. This CGR, it will be presented in 3 parts. First part will be theory part, which will be taken by Dr. Vasundhara, followed by data presentation, which will be done by Dr. Bharat and Dr. Indranil. And before I come to the main discussion, there are a few things which I would like to highlight. And one of these things, they are mainly like we were one of the few departments in PGI which were functional round the clock despite lockdowns or pandemic. So we were offering our services to COVID and non-COVID patients throughout these last 6 months. Another issue was that when COVID testing was mandated by every department, we were the one of the, I think, the only department in the institute where we welcomed our donors without any COVID report, and our staff, resident and faculty including, they were not wearing this N95 or PPE kit, except for outdoor blood donation camps. And we were offering full services, almost 70 to 90% of the previous capacity, pre-pandemic capacity. And that was despite the fact that 30% of our staff, our residents, they were asked to do RCH ward duty. And this is considering the fact that we are we are considered as a lab department, but for the purpose of COVID duties for this pandemic, we were counted as clinical department. And this was something like just like remdesivir, the Department of Transfusion Medicine was repurposed as clinical department for this pandemic at this time of crisis. Having said that, I would like to emphasize that every department contributed in their own way. They contributed, like some were just like say Army, they were in the forefront, and some were they were behind them, just like BSF. With these words, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Vasundhara, who will take the theory part. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I shall begin with today's CGR, COVID-19 Insights from Transfusion Medicine. As we all know, COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by acute severe respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 and has resulted in an ongoing pandemic. First identified in December 2019 in Wuhan, China, it rapidly spread worldwide, and the first case in India was reported on 30th of January 2020, almost a year ago from now, in Kerala. In India, as of 1st January, more than 1 crore cases have been reported, and almost 1.5 lakh people have succumbed to death due to the virus. Now, although our blood components were not directly affected by the virus, since there is no evidence of it being transmitted through blood, our blood supply was reduced to a great extent due to the reduction of movement of the masses. We also had to set up a dedicated COVID lab to process the sample of RCH patients for ABO grouping, cross-matching, thromboelastography, and screening for heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. We also procured and provided our COVID patients convalescent plasma therapy, which included testing for donor and patient IgG antibody levels against COVID-19 virus. Now, I will be briefing you on these topics theoretically, while the data presentation of blood supply and its management will be taken up by Dr. Bharat, and that of laboratory support and convalescent plasma therapy will be taken up by Dr. Indraneel. Let's start with blood supply and its management first. As COVID began spreading and a nationwide lockdown was implemented, our blood supply started diminishing. We were left with the burning question of how to provide blood to our routine patients. So we resorted to the power of social media, which is one of the most powerful contemporary tools of communication. We contacted our voluntary donors through WhatsApp and provided them with e-passes. We also arranged conveyance for those who requested for it. Both of these efforts led to easy and unhindered commute of voluntary donors through lockdown. Apart from the aforementioned steps, our staff also welcomed and escorted our voluntary donors, starting from the hospital campus entrance. Expedite entry and not asking for a compulsory COVID negative test led to the shortening of the entire process of donation to a great extent. Our voluntary donors were also sincerely appreciated for their contributions, and certificates were awarded to them. Our entire staff was mobilized in making the donation process easy and quick for our voluntary donors. Now, coming to the safety measures, when as a safety measure, the entire hospital made COVID-19 negative test compulsory for all sorts of entries, we only got 5 donors per day in the first 2 days. We quickly realized that we could not ask our whole blood donors to go through the compulsory COVID-19 testing, as it would further reduce our stock. However, in order to protect our staff, we had to turn to an additional thermal screening at the entrance of our blood donation area. We modified our screening questionnaire to rule out possible cases. We installed automatic hand sanitizer dispensers in the department. And we stuck to compulsory hand sanitization for both donors and staff. We also excluded donors from the red zone. This is a pre-donation consent form that all of our blood donors are required to fill. We elicit a history of symptoms, travel, contact, or being positive from the donors. Here on the display are post-donation forms. All of our donors are provided with them with the department's contact number mentioned. They are advised to promptly inform us if they develop any symptoms or test positive in the next 14 days, so that we can take the appropriate steps to protect our staff. Now, as already mentioned, since neither of our faculty, residents, or nor our staff was provided with full body PPE, we were working with just gloves and masks even during the peak of pandemic, and no donors having a COVID-19 test or even wearing an N95 mask. We required regular motivation of our staff, and pep talks were the key factor that sailed us through. We organized mini camps in order to provide for our patients of hematology and thalassemia. So to sustain for a steady supply, we asked for 20 donors each mini camps, which were blood mobile vehicle based. Proper sanitization and social distancing were maintained, while still no donors were being asked for a compulsory COVID-19 testing or N95 masks. Now moving on to the support for COVID-19 patients, which was provided in 2 forms, laboratory and convalescent plasma therapy. In lab support, we have ABO grouping, cross-matching, thromboelastography, and screening for heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. As already mentioned, we have made a dedicated COVID lab to process RCH patients' samples. While ABO grouping is being done in ATC 24-hour lab on an emergency basis, we do the confirmatory tests and validate it on HIS. Cross-matching for all those RCH patients who require transfusion support is also done in our COVID lab only. Another test that we do for RCH patient is thromboelastography or TEG. It is a viscoelastic hemostatic assay which measures platelet aggregation, clot strengthening, fibrin cross-linking, and fibrinolysis. COVID-19 patients are seen to have venous and arterial thrombotic events. Hypercoagulable state induced by severe inflammation is also there. They may also have hypocoagulable state due to anticoagulant use. Here, TEG is used to determine the coagulation status in such patients in addition to conventional coagulation tests. The next test that we provide is screening for heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. In critically ill COVID-19 patients, a systemic inflammatory response associated with endothelial activation is seen. This causes various thrombotic complications, including DVT. Anticoagulation with high doses of heparin is used, predisposing these patients to heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. We provide a screening service for this. Our next subheading is lab support for COVID patients is convalescent plasma. To this date, there is no effective treatment for the disease. ICMR has approved the emergency use of convalescent plasma for patients with moderate COVID-19 in July 2020. And according to the recent guidelines that were given to us in November 2020, all of those who can donate apheresis platelets are taken up for donations, given that they have a diagnosis of COVID-19 either by RT-PCR or an antigen test. They can donate after the resolution of symptoms after 14 days have completed, and a negative COVID-19 test is not mandatory. The required concentration of IgG antibodies against COVID-19 are to be up to various thresholds as decided by various methods of testing. While the potential recipients are those in early stage of COVID-19 disease, preferably from 3 to 7 days and not more than 10 days. No IgG antibodies against COVID-19 should be there in the recipients, and they should provide us with an informed consent. Voluntary donors for convalescent plasma were recruited from various parts of the city. We put up banners and pamphlets and made calls to recovered patients to motivate them to donate convalescent plasma voluntarily. After ruling out their eligibility as an apheresis donor, a short history of COVID-19 disease is elicited from interested potential donors, including symptoms, duration of symptoms, and history of hospitalization versus home isolation. Samples for antibody titration, transfusion transmitted infection, and hematological parameters are then taken from those interested. Convalescent plasma is collected by plasmapheresis process from donors whose antibody levels are above threshold. One plasmapheresis procedure yields 400 ml of plasma, which is then divided into 2 units of 200 ml each. Patients that require convalescent plasma are tested for their antibody levels, and convalescent plasma is issued to those whose antibody titer is non-reactive. This is our SDPJMS guideline, which is being used to provide convalescent plasma to COVID patients. In moderate cases, we are providing convalescent plasma in early course of disease, while for severe patients, we are providing convalescent plasma as a rescue therapy or on compassionate grounds. Now over to Dr. Bharat for data presentation of COVID-19 and blood collection.
Thank you, Dr. Vasundhara. Good morning, everyone. In the next few slides, I will be discussing issues related to blood collection and demand, concerns on blood safety and transfusion support in COVID and other patients. Starting with trend of blood collection during pandemic. Here, comparison of blood collection during lockdown and pre-lockdown period is being shown. Lockdown period was 67 days long and included all 4 phases of lockdown, while a period of 67 days preceding lockdown was considered as pre-lockdown period for comparison. Here, we can see that during pre-lockdown period, whole blood mean collection per day was 87, while it drops up to 26 units per day in the lockdown period. It was decreased by approximately 70%, while SDP mean collection per day was 3.7 units per day in pre-lockdown phase, while it was decreased up to 1.9, that is decreased by 49% in the lockdown phase. At present, we are still at approximately 60% of replacement as of pre-lockdown phase, but definitely recovering. We are not alone who faced challenges on the front of blood collection. Pandemics are known to affect blood supplies, as evident by SARS and influenza epidemics in 2004 and 2009 respectively, and in present pandemic also as reported by various authors. So what were the factors responsible for this drop in blood collection? On analysis, we found following factors responsible for significant drop in blood collection, like restriction on public movement, A new myth arises: will I get COVID-19 at blood center, as we are advised to stay at home? Increase in prospective donor deferral, suspension of large voluntary blood donation camps, and decrease in functional beds in non-COVID area. As discussed in previous slide, increased donor deferral was also responsible for drop in blood collection. So here is the data related to blood donor deferral. We can appreciate that whole blood donor deferral was 9.9% in the pre-lockdown period, while it was increased up to 15.4% in the lockdown period, and it was overall it was increased by 35%. While if we talk about SDP donors, in the pre-lockdown period, SDP donor deferral was 12.3% out of total percentage of donors screened. While in the lockdown period, it was 22%. It was increased by 90%. At present, donor deferral rates are approximately similar to the pre-lockdown phase. As we know, donor deferral was increased during lockdown. So what might be the causes for this change? We could identify following factors responsible for this increased donor deferral: exclusion of at-risk donors due to travel history, contact history, and thermal screening at our donor area; influx of donors with high-risk behavior or suspicious behavior. Other authors have also reported similar trend in donor deferral from various parts of the world. As discussed earlier, COVID-19 screening was a contributing factor for increased donor deferral. Here is the data for donor deferral due to COVID-19 related screening. By thermal screening, we deferred 1.8% of donor out of total 15.4% of total deferral. While if we talk about at risk of COVID-19 exposure, total deferral was 1.6% out of total deferral of 15.4%. As of now, deferral by thermal screening is same as during lockdown, while deferral due to COVID-19 exposure get decreased, possibly due to increased donor awareness. As we have seen, there was acute fall in blood collection during lockdown. We have taken few measures to meet transfusion demands, like as Dr. Vasundhara has described already, organizing mini voluntary blood donation camps, issuing e-pass, and many others like use of social media for voluntary blood donation recruitments. As discussed earlier, we have promoted voluntary blood donation and donation by appointment more aggressively during lockdown. This slide shows increase in voluntary blood donation and donation by appointment during the lockdown period as compared to pre-lockdown phase. We can appreciate voluntary whole blood donation was increased from 6.4% to 15.2% during the lockdown period, and it was increased by approximately 2.5 times in the lockdown phase. While if you talk about voluntary blood donation for SDP, it was increased from 2.3% to 17% in the lockdown period. It was increased by approximately 5 times in the lockdown phase. This slide shows the summary of mean collection per day, percentage of voluntary blood donation, and percentage of donation by appointment during lockdown phase as compared to the pre-lockdown phase. We can appreciate that mean collection per day was decreased significantly during lockdown phase, whereas percentage of voluntary blood donation and donation by appointment was increased during different phases of lockdown for both whole blood and SDP collection. Till now, I was discussing how blood collection was affected during lockdown, factors responsible, and their mitigating strategies. Now, in the next few slides, I will focus on demand of blood collection in relation to collection during different phases. Here in this slide, trend of PRBC, FFP, and RDP issued per day is being shown during lockdown and pre-lockdown. We can see that during lockdown 1 and 2, there was sharp fall in blood component demand due to strict ban on public movement. While after some relaxation in lockdown rules, demand started rising again. At present, we are at around 60% of total demand as of pre-lockdown phase for all the blood components. Here is the comparison of blood collection and issue per day in different phases along with the wastage. We can see that both collection and issue were falling parallel during lockdown 1 and 2. Due to acute fall in demand, time expiry of blood was also increased. On realization that demands are less and wastage increasing, we stopped insisting for replacement donation. At the time, At the same time, due to relaxation in lockdown rules, demand also get increased. As a result, issue per day was more than units collected per day during the lockdown 3 and 4. By doing this, we balance demand and supply. This balance is also being reflected in decreased wastage in the lockdown 3 and 4. So with this experience, we learned that maintaining balance between supply and demand is even more crucial during pandemics, when you are not certain about demand and supply status in the coming days. Many authors have also highlighted the importance of maintaining this balance. Till now, it's not proved that COVID-19 virus can be transmitted through blood. So we were relatively assured on this issue, but we faced other challenges related to blood safety during this pandemic. And this will be discussed in next few slides. We noticed influx of donors with high risk behavior or suspicious behavior during lockdown phase. As we can see, donor deferred for coming for whole blood, deferred for high risk behavior or suspicious behavior, where 0.75% in the pre-lockdown phase, while it rises up to 2.5% in the lockdown phase. The deferral increased for this reason was approximately 3 times as compared to the pre-lockdown phase. If we talk about SDP donors, in the pre-lockdown phase, deferral due to high risk behavior was 0.85%, while in the lockdown phase, it was 2.7%, approximately again, approximately 3 times higher than the pre-lockdown phase. At present, we are differing similar proportion of donors for high risk behavior or suspicious behavior as in the pre-lockdown phase. This reflects improvement on the safety profile of blood donors again. As we discussed in previous slide, donors with high risk behavior or suspicious behavior were on the rise during lockdown. Despite our vigilant screening to screen them out, that is also reflected by increase in donor deferral for high risk behavior or suspicious behavior. Some donors were anyhow able to cross the donor screening questionnaire, but finally picked up in TTI testing. This resulted in statistically significant increase in donors TTI reactivity. This finding suggests that quality of donor may deteriorate during lockdown-like situation when donors are not available easily. So blood transfusion services should be more vigilant in donor screening and testing. Similar trend was noticed in USA after 9/11 attack, when an influx of donors was noticed who wanted to donate blood eagerly to help others even by hiding their medical history. During these difficult times, we tried to support all patients who needed transfusion, including long-term transfusion-dependent patients like thalassemia and hemato-oncology patients. If we talk about thalassemia patients, there are around 400 thalassemia patients who are getting transfusion support from our center. Out of these 400, around 25% require antigen-matched blood to prevent alloimmunization against lacking red cell antigen, while around 8% patients are already sensitized with the red cell antibody and requiring antigen negative blood to prevent any hemolytic transfusion reaction. We are the only center in Lucknow equipped with this facility. We tried our best to support all these patients coming across the state. For these patients, we also issued blood for outside transfusion. Along with non-COVID patients, we also supported COVID patients for their transfusion needs. In next few slides, I will be discussing transfusion support in COVID patients. Out of total 1,328 patients admitted till 30th September, total 126 equal to 9.5% were required transfusion support. Out of 126 transfused patients, 56%, 25%, 35 and 6% patients required PRBC, FFP, RDP and cryoprecipitate respectively. More than one type of blood components were required in 36, that is 28.5% of patients. Here in this slide, we have given details of de novo requirements of blood components by COVID patients. De novo requirement is defined as transfusion requirement by a patient who was hematologically normal at the time of admission and was not having any known condition requiring regular blood transfusion. That is, transfusion requirement by a patient in which transfusion was not anticipated at the time of admission. Out of the total 126 COVID patients who required transfusion, 46% requirement were de novo in nature. If we talk about different components separately, about 48%, 31%, 41%, and 13% requirements for PRBC, FFP, RDP, and cryoprecipitates were de novo in nature. This significant number of de novo demand suggests that COVID-related pathology might affect patient hematological and hemostatic parameters, and this will finally culminate in transfusion requirement in cases where it was not anticipated. So, blood transfusion services should be prepared to meet these unanticipated demands. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Neil to present laboratory part of transfusion medicine during COVID-19.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks to Drs. Vasundhara and Dr. Bharat. So I'll be presenting our lab data as well as data from our convalescent plasma therapy program. So we are having a dedicated COVID lab in the Department of Transfusion Medicine, where we are processing ABO grouping, cross-matching, as well as thromboelastography. And even we are screening patients for heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, especially for COVID patients also. So first I'll be discussing our ABO grouping data. So we have from the month of June, when we have started the COVID lab, till 31st December, we have received samples of 627 patients from RCH. And we have found that the majority of the patients is of the B group, followed by O, A, and AB. So this distribution almost follows the same pattern as that of a general population. So we did not find any significant difference with the general population. And next, I'll be covering the hemostatic picture. I was observed in our RCH patients. So till date, we have received the samples of 46 patients from RCH with suspected abnormal coagulation tests, or they're having clinically or radiologically observed bleeding or thrombosis, or the patients had normal CCTs with increasing oxygen requirement despite anticoagulant prophylaxis. So this thromboelastography is a viscoelastic test, which depicts clot the dynamics from the initiation of clot formation to up to the clot lysis. So these are point of care testing, which highlights the importance of the coagulation factors in the patient. So we are having two cups here, as shown here, in which the sample is loaded. This is a plain cup for patients who are not on any heparin, and this is the blue cup, which is in which the patients who are on heparin, their sample is loaded. It is also known as heparinase cup. So till now we have received 46 patients. So out of the 46 patients, we found that majority were having a hypercoagulant picture, that is some procoagulant state, which was similar compared to most of the studies. And we even found 11% of patients having a hypocoagulant picture with some bleeding tendency, which was similar to a study by Ibanez et al., in which they had found some 10% hypocoagulant picture. But it is known in most of the literature that COVID-19 is a procoagulant state. So this is the commonest, this is the normal coagulation profile, which is observed in most of the many of the patients in RCH. So these are graphs showing thromboelastography, and these values R, K, angle, MA, and LY30 are the main determinants. So this R value represents the time from the initiation of the clot formation after loading the sample in the cups up to the level of the initiation of clot formation, which is dependent mainly on the clotting factors. And this K represents the time from the initiation of clot formation to some degree of clot firmness. And this angle and MA, this angle represents the speed of the clot formation, while maximum amplitude is the distance between these two arms. This is dependent mostly on the platelets and fibrinogen. So this R value depends mostly on the coagulation factors in the plasma or the plasma proteins. This K value from the time of formation of a clot to a little bit of clot strength, this is dependent mostly on the fibrinogen. This angle and MA mostly depends on platelet and fibrinogen. If the R value is less than 2 minutes, it represents a hypocoagulable state, and if it is more than 8 minutes, that is considered as hypocoagulable. However, in K value, if it is a decreased K value, it represents a hypercoagulable picture. That is either due to increased platelets or increased fibrinogen. And this angle and MA, if the angle is less than 55 or the MA is less than 51, they represent a hypocoagulable picture. If the values are more, that represents a procoagulant state. And this LY30, this parameter represents the degree of lysis of the clot after formation after 30 minutes from the loading the sample. So this represents the degree of fibrinolysis. This is a normal coagulation profile observed in a COVID patient. The commonest picture is hypercoagulation, which we observed in most of the patients, that is 50% of the patients. So here we can observe that this R value is normal. However, the K, it has decreased to 0.8, less than 1. Here the MA, the maximum amplitude, has increased to more than 69, that is 79.1. So this could be because of either increase in the platelets or increase in the fibrinogen. So here in the TEG findings, we observed this decreased K and increased MA. They were the predominant findings, and many patients with this COVID-19 pneumonia had a hypercholesterol despite LMWH prophylaxis, and these patients were advised for a dose adjustment in the low molecular weight heparin. So 11% of our patients, we had observed a hypercoagular picture, that is a decrease in the coagulation factors. So here this is seen, K value is more than 3, which could be either because of decreased number of platelets or decreased fibrinogen. In the angle and MA, we can observe they are also decreased. So this is could be because of a decreased platelet of fibrinogen. In this patient, the patient had a thrombocytopenia, and the patient was on low molecular weight heparin also. So these are example of a hypercoagular picture observed in TEG. Now this TEG is used as an additive test to help in the guiding the transfusion therapy of specific components in patients in other diseases also. But in COVID also, I'd like to highlight 3 cases where the TEG-based therapy was useful. The first patient was a 66-year-old male with pulmonary thromboembolism documented by clinical and radiological findings also, and the patient had undergone therapeutic thrombolysis. And when the conventional coagulation tests such as platelet count and fibrinogen and PT and APT was done, it was found that the patient had thrombocytopenia and hyperfibrinogenemia. However, the PT and APT was within the normal range. And that when we did the thromboelastography, this R value, which generally corresponds to the PT and APTT, it was raised. And this angle and MA, which corresponds to platelet and fibrinogen, was decreased. So this was a hypocoagulant picture. So in this patient, some different components for platelet, PRBC, FFP were transfused, and the bleeding was controlled. So if we had relied only on the values of conventional coagulation tests, such as this PT, we would have not transfused FFP in this case. The second patient, a 40-year-old male with a history of mucosal bleeding and was planned for transfusion. So in this patient had a thrombocytopenia, and fibrinogen level was on the lower normal side. However, the PT was prolonged and APT was in the normal range. When we did a thromboelastography of this patient, so the R value, which corresponds to the PT and APT, this was in the normal side. However, there was an increase in K and decrease MA. So this is corresponding to the thrombocytopenic picture, and this was a hypocoagulant picture, and only platelet concentrates was advised. And this patient, FFP was avoided. So if you would have based our transfusion based on this PT in this patient, so if we would have transfused FFP unnecessarily. In third patient, a 30-year-old male with a history of clinical bleeding and undergoing transfusions, we observed a hypocoagulant picture in the conventional coagulation test also. There was decreased platelet, there was decreased fibrinogen levels, there was prolonged PT and APTT. However, the TEG findings were normal. All this R value, K value, and MA and LY30, what we discussed previously, they were in the normal limits. And the patient's bleeding was minimal. So since the coagulation profile was normal and slightly correlating with the clinical history, therefore further transfusion was avoided. So the thromboelastography is a useful investigation to guide the specific component therapy and transfusion in COVID patients also. Now this fourth patient was a 65-year-old male with sepsis and GI bleeding. The platelet count was 1,46,000. When INR was slightly elevated, APT was in the normal range, and however the fibrinogen was low as per the conventional tests. And when the first sample was received for thromboelastography, we found that there was a increase in the K value, which is correlating with the decreased fibrinogen levels. There was angle and MA also, which is decreasing with the corresponding with the decrease in the platelet count also. But we correlated our TEG with the conventional tests, and we advised cryoprecipitates. So this patient was transfused only cryoprecipitates and bleeding was controlled, and therefore the repeat TEG was normal. So platelet transfusion was avoided in this case. So specific component therapy, example cryoprecipitate here in this case, was given to this patient. Now this graph is showing the hemostatic profile based on a TEG and the final outcomes of these patients. So as we can observe that the patients who had a hypocoagulable state, they had a poor recovery rate, 20%, compared to the patients, the majority of the patients who are either hypocoagulable or normal. So the patients who are having a hypocoagulable state needs to be viewed seriously. Now there have been some few case reports that COVID-19 predisposes patients to heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, especially those patients who are on low molecular weight heparin prophylaxis. So we had 5 such patients from RCH who had a drop in platelet count more than 50% from the baseline, and they were on prophylaxis of LMWH, and they had thrombocytopenia not attributable to other causes. So those 5 patients had undergone test for a heparin-induced thrombocytopenia antibody. So out of those 5 patients, only 1 patient we have found as positive. The test is done with a gel card, which is shown here. This is a positive control, this is a negative control, and this is the test of the patient, which is showing a positive screening test for the heparin PF4 antibody. So this patient platelet count was 52,000 on the day of the testing, and this other cause of thrombocytopenia in this patient had been ruled out. For example, the bone marrow biopsy in this patient was normal. So this is the platelet count profile of that patient. So at that time, since the admission, there's been a decreasing trend in the platelet counts of this patient, and we have received that test for screening for heparin-induced thrombocytopenia on the 1st of October, and 1 day prior to that our testing, the patient had received a transfusion of apheresis platelet. So after that the counts had improved, but when the test came positive, the patient was planned for another dose of transfusion of platelet, but the patient was not transfused since the patient was hit positive, and thereafter the low molecular weight heparin was withheld, and he gradually recovered. At the time of discharge, his platelet count was 90,000. So in patients with thrombocytopenia with a low molecular weight heparin or unfractionated heparin prophylaxis without any obvious cause in a COVID patient, so we need to rule out the possibility of a heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Now I'll be summarizing a few data from our convalescent plasma therapy program, which was started in July 2020 as a part of our ICMR trial, thereafter as an off-label use. So these are some of the volunteers from our own institute who are shown here, including many of our staff, our doctors have volunteered to donate convalescent plasma after being recovered from COVID infection. So till 31st December, we have 81 donations. So majority are voluntary, and 79% collection was done by female apheresis, and we had 1 female donor also. And this is the trend of donations from the beginning of our donation program in July up to 31st December. So we observed that there was a increasing trend of plasma donations during the months of September, October, and November, when there was the maximum number of patients being admitted in RCH, coinciding with the peak of the pandemic. Thereafter, the donations have decreased in this order, because after the publication of the ICMR results, there was decrease in usage of plasma in the different patients also, and there was a lack of enthusiasm among donors. Plus, the advent of festival season has also had an impact on the decrease in the number of donations in December. So the donations, the units which are collected for convalescent plasma in our center also tested for our IgG antibody against COVID-19. So we are using a chemiluminescence based assay for determination of this antibody by a signal cutoff ratio, which is also known as index value. So in our center, 12 or above, the index value is considered as good titer for these antibodies against COVID. Now this graph is showing the mean antibody levels in our convalescent plasma donors as compared to the in relation with the clinical history. So those donors who are symptomatic, especially with the history of fever or respiratory symptoms, are found to have a higher antibody levels compared to those who are either having some other symptoms such as myalgia, loss of smell or taste, or asymptomatic donors. So even those donors with no history of fever or respiratory symptoms, we found no antibody levels. So the highest levels of antibodies observed in those those donors with a index value of 17.63 mean index value. So so fever and respiratory symptom was the main history which is responsible for development of antibody. So this is the graph is showing the recipients of our RCH who have been transfused with convalescent plasma therapy. So from July to December, 124 recipients have been transfused, and maximum usage of convalescent plasma has been observed in the months of September, followed by October and November. And the age group was 26 to 84 years, and mostly males and females. So the maximum plasma usage was in the months of September to November, at the height of the pandemic, when maximum patients were being admitted at RCH. Thereafter, due to decrease in the number of patients and after the publication of the ICMR trials, so which showed that convalescent plasma may not be useful in patients, so there was a decrease in use of convalescent plasma. So thereafter, the trend of usage has decreased in the month of December. So even few of the patients we had tested for IgG antibodies, and we found that from the onset of symptoms, if it is more than 7 days, the probability of developing antibody is more. So after if the patients who are having more than 14 days from the onset of symptoms, almost all whatever we have tested, they have found positive for IgG antibody against COVID-19. So if the days of from the onset of symptoms more than 14 days, convalescent plasma may not be useful. And this graph is showing the overall recovery rates, and according to the category wise of the disease also. So overall recovery rate was 51% in the 124 convalescent plasma recipients, and we observed that mild and moderate disease had better recovery rates compared to the patients with severe disease. So to summarize, so pandemics may cause acute fall in blood supply and rise in donor deferral rates, and even there can be an influx of high risk donors which can change the blood donor safety profile. And therefore, efforts for recruiting voluntary donors and donation by appointment are effective in maintaining a balance between the demand and supply, and to maintain our transfusion service in this pandemic situation. And although COVID-19 has not been proven to be transmitted by blood, but still many patients may require transfusion due to COVID-related pathology. And most of the literatures have shown that COVID-19 predominantly predisposes patients to a prothrombotic state. But however, we observe that patients who are hypocoagulable at a higher risk of mortality, and they need urgent intervention. So TEG is a useful investigation as an add-on to the conventional coagulation test to guide management of these patients. And the possibility of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia must also be considered in COVID patients on prophylactic heparin with thrombocytopenia not attributable to any other causes. And convalescent plasma therapy is effective in the early stages of the COVID-19 pneumonia before the disease has progressed to severity. So we'd like to acknowledge our respective in charges. Thank you.